So welcome everybody, welcome to Sangha Night. And the title of the talk this evening is Reduce Input, Awareness versus the Distraction Industry. We've got a theme at the moment at Sangha Night about transforming self and transforming world. And we've had a few different talks now on this theme, and what we've seen is that both basically they're inseparable. If you need to transform, if you want to transform the world, you need to be working on your own mental states. And if you want to transform yourself, you also need to transform the conditions and the world around you. So we've seen that the two are inseparable. And we've had a couple of talks specifically on transforming yourself. And then we've had a couple of talks in the last couple of weeks about transforming the world. We had the talk by Bodhinaga, which was a really exciting talk about the generosity, the gift relationship and altruism in Buddhism and in modern capitalist economics. And I'm going to be drawing from a chapter in his book this evening, chapter 7, about what he calls the attention economy. So do get this copy of this book if you want to, it's very good. And then last week, Vajratara talked to us about the Dharma revolution in India. And she talked to us about the work of Dr. Ambedkar and his followers who've converted to Buddhism, and how there's been a revolution, the world has been transformed, there's been a Dharma revolution in India. And I'm going to be picking up one of the threads from Vajratara's talk this evening. Both threads from both of those two talks, but Vajratara talked about a recipe for Dr. Ambedkar's followers, and one of the things she talked about, she drew out was taking responsibility for ourselves, taking responsibility for our own actions, our own states. And the way we do that is through awareness, becoming more aware of our actions, our mind, the consequences of our actions, our emotions, our habits. So, if we want a Dharma revolution like that which has happened in India, we need awareness. And there's our teacher, the founder of our movement, Sangha Rakshita, there's a very famous in our movement phrase of his from the early days of our movement in the 60s, which is that awareness is revolutionary. Awareness is revolutionary. And that's really going to be the central theme of the talk, so I've written it up on there so I don't forget. Awareness is revolutionary. So what is awareness and why is it so important? Well, to begin with, from a Buddhist perspective, awareness is what makes us human, actually. Awareness is what makes us truly a human being. So that aware state of mind is what makes us human. It's the sense of being connected with ourselves, not kind of lost in thoughts about the past or the future, not lost in anxiety or stories, but just really present with ourselves and being fully connected with ourselves enables us to be fully human. And it's said traditionally what differentiates us from animals and other classes of beings is that we have self-reflexive awareness, what's called self-reflexive awareness. And it's basically the ability to step back and observe our mind in a way, our consciousness, just to be aware that we are aware and to make choices. That enables us to make decisions and make choices. That's one of the reasons why awareness is so important. It's the key, the start of the spiritual life. But it's also the goal of the spiritual life as well. So the name, the Buddha, which is where our religion, the reason we're all here, was because of the Buddha. And the word Buddha was given to Siddhartha Gautama because he described his experience on enlightenment as though he woke up. He said it's as though he became awake, that he woke up. So people started to call him the Buddha, the man who was woken up. So he described it as though, basically as if we're asleep, we're kind of daydreaming, we're asleep, and it's possible to become, with awareness, to become more and more awake, more and more kind of vividly alive, more and more aware of our mind and what's happening, and ultimately to become aware of reality. So awareness is central to Buddhism and revolutionary. Following the path to wisdom, following the Buddha's path to wisdom, involves being able to train our mind to focus on one thing. So if we're going to kind of try and reflect on wisdom teachings or or change our consciousness, change our being, we need to be able to kind of stick on one path and stick, we need to train our mind just to kind of be able to not drift off, not get distracted, but to be fixed on one thing. So the Buddha taught mindfulness as a means to cultivate awareness. The Buddha taught practices like the mindfulness of breathing, so we can just train our mind to just become focused and concentrate on one thing, and to avoid getting distracted and drifting off, just to keep coming back. Sangha Night, who's, as I said, the founder of our tradition, Triratna Buddhism, he expanded the traditional list of what mindfulness and awareness is about to include extra things, really, to kind of fill out what our understanding of awareness and mindfulness is. So I'll come back to these later, but essentially what awareness covers is ourself, being aware of ourself. So as I mentioned, being with ourself right now, in the present moment, being aware of our body. So if I drift off into anxiety during this talk or nerves, I need to kind of come back to my body and my breathing. I'm rooted on the stage, so I'll be trying to do that throughout the talk. Be aware of my belly, relax it, just allow it to breathe and not be tense. To be aware of any kind of passing emotions as they come through. So we're aware of ourselves, but mindfulness doesn't stop there, awareness doesn't stop there, because we're also aware of other people, the other people around us, and that they have bodies, they have emotions, they have thoughts and views. And also we are aware of things, which is kind of shorthand for the world, the environment, the world around us, nature, just our context, our physical situation. Through awareness transforms our experience of the world around us, as we'll see hopefully later. And then finally, which was also in the Buddha's traditional list, it extends ultimately to awareness of reality as things as they are. So awareness is really central to Buddhism and revolutionary. So I'll return to this list and I'll leave that page up just to remind us that awareness is revolutionary, in case we get distracted, as I might do. Yes, in the Buddha's time, he was very much aware of the tendency of the mind to get distracted, to kind of wander away from what we intend to focus on. And so that was very much a part of the Buddha and his disciples, their minds at the time. And you could say, 2,500 years later, it's even more important, or it's just as important, and perhaps even more important. It could be said that 2,500 years after the time of the Buddha, that awareness is under attack, it's under threat from input. There's just so much input, there's like an input overload, so much kind of sensory information being bombarding us, you could say attacking us, and our attention is under threat of just being dispersed in lots of different directions. So in 1993, Sangha Night gave a talk specifically to order members, but he gave 15 kind of bits of advice, 15 points to consider, and one of those points, which is really important today still, was reduce input. Reduce input. And great. So this is a practice not to get distracted. Can you stay focused on the talk whilst other things are happening? So let's see. So in 1993, Sangha Night was encouraging the order to reduce input, to reduce our input. And he was saying, well, this didn't include computers, because in 1993, we did have computers, of course, but it was before the age of the internet really taken off, and social media and all the rest of things. There weren't mobile phones were just kind of taking off. So Sangha Night said he didn't know much about computers, but what he was talking about was TV and radio and things like that. Just that they... let's read what he said. I've got it somewhere. What he said in 1993 was, we are sort of a receiving station all of the time, but we do not have to allow these different factors and influences to play on us constantly without any sort of control or restriction. So he used this kind of almost like this idea, this image of us being like a receiving station, like a radio antennae with all these kind of signals coming in all the time, but we've got a choice about what we receive, and we can control, in a sense, what we receive. So he was encouraging order members back in 1993 just to kind of reduce input and be a bit more controlled about what input they take on. But he said, yeah, this was he wasn't even talking about computers, because he said he didn't understand much about them, and this was before they'd really started to take off. So, yeah, you could say, well, today there's a vast industry devoted to distracting us, to kind of trying to capture our attention. Yeah, and Bodhinaga talks about this very, very well in his book. But yeah, we've got smartphones. I've got a smartphone. We've got tablets. I've got a tablet. E-books. I haven't got an e-book, but I haven't got time for an e-book. Laptops. I've got a laptop. iPads, Facebook, Twitter. So there's all kinds of ways in which our senses are assaulted in a way. We're kind of under things pulling us away from our just direct experience right now. There's all kinds of pulls which weren't there 20 years ago, certainly weren't there 2,500 years ago. Yeah, just to give you an example of kind of how they can pull us away from our experience, I was actually trying to write this section of this talk about distraction, and I was distracted. Yeah, basically wanted to check my emails. It was basically a few minutes. I wanted to check my emails, check the cricket score. It was a few days ago, and I made an online purchase. I bought something, all in the space of a few minutes, when I was trying to concentrate on writing this section of this talk about distraction. So, yeah. So we've got smartphones, which we didn't have 10 years ago. I don't know when they first invented, but we've got smartphones, and they're highly addictive. You've got kind of you can hold them just in front of your face, and like we all do it, or lots of us do it, and there's a whole world that you can be drawn into, and apparently the average person will check their phone 150 times each day, which does sound like a lot of time to check a phone, doesn't it? And I thought that can't be true, so I started to just pay more attention, become more aware of how many times I was checking my phone. It must be like 10 times, 5 times a day, but it was more like 5 or 10 times an hour. Now I'm starting to pay more attention to it, just checking the time, checking my emails again, checking the football scores, checking the emails again. just constantly addicted to looking at my phone. So I'll talk a bit more about that, why that might be shortly. Yeah, but there's a phrase that is used in Bodhinaga's book about the digital dead shuffling slowly with the smartphones. And I can sometimes be one of those digital dead, just kind of walking along the street with my face glued to a screen, a smartphone. And there was a study that was done apparently in Seattle, and 1 in 3 pedestrians was distracted by a phone in some way whilst they were walking and crossing the road. And it just kind of shows the extent to which already our attention is being distracted, our minds are being distracted by smartphones. And then, it's not to mention advertising. So advertising is designed to distract us. It's designed to grab our attention and to send us in a different direction, to send us, to make us more inclined to buy something that we weren't going to buy. And I know I used to work in the advertising industry. That was my profession many years ago. So we've got these very powerful sensory input all around, trying to grab our attention, deliberately trying to distract us. And then when you combine that with the internet and advertising, well, it's immediate. That we're just kind of bombarded with messages, subtle messages, adverts, and it's just a click away to buy something, to purchase something. So there's a gentleman called Eric Schmidt, and apparently he was the chief executive of Google in the 90s, and he came up with a phrase called the attention economy. The attention economy. And his belief was that the most successful companies would be the companies that could control our eyeballs the most, in a way, can kind of get control of our attention and our eyeballs, what we were looking at. And that's an economy that would be dictate which companies would be the most successful. So I am going to be disparaging about social media and the internet, so I hope I don't offend too many people. But I also want to say, well, there's a very positive aspect, of course, to the internet and to social media. Bodhinaga mentions Wikipedia, which I agree is a really positive tool. Just the sense in which on the internet you can get so much information. So much learning and impossible learning education is just available, which in a way like it wasn't before. The ability to make contact, to connect with people. And Bodhinaga talks about a kind of messy democracy, he calls it, which social media can help people to kind of share information, share political information, share... you can look at just the recent crisis in Nepal, the earthquake in Nepal, and how people were able to respond, send money, find out about it, and all that was possible because of social media and the internet. So there are really positive aspects, of course, to the internet and to social media, but it's also worth being aware of the sacrifices that, the cost, the price that these things come with. And it's also worth being aware that Facebook is a company. They are making money out of us in a way. It's that's what they do. That's what companies are for. And it's great that we can look at pictures of cats and kind of cats falling over and doing funny things. It's great that we can send information. Sometimes very useful political information. It's great that we can get in contact with long friends that we haven't seen for a long time. All these things can be very helpful, but at the same time Facebook are making money out of that. They will use the data that we put onto Facebook and sometimes sell it, or they will be able to find out what our preferences are. And there's all kinds of ways in which Facebook and Google will make money from our browsing habits, our preferences, our profiles. Basically so the image that came to mind for me is a bit like a kind of a dairy farm almost, like we're kind of being milked for our data, and in a sense we are a product. We become a product by engaging with Google and Facebook, and they're free and there's lots of advantages to them, but they sell for quite high value our lives basically, and our information, our email data, all these kind of stuff is used to make lots of money. So it's worth just being aware of the context of kind of the actual real situation of it. And there's a journalist from the Harvard Business Review, a guy whose name I will remember in a second when I look at this, Nicholas Carr from the Harvard Business Review. And it's something quite striking that is quoted in Bodhinaga's book from an article in the Harvard Business Review. And it's about the idea that our minds becoming trained to work faster, to kind of think faster, to kind of process information faster, to kind of click through and get to a purchase faster, and that this is financial. This is a financial benefit to companies like Google and Facebook. So Nicholas Carr writes that the faster we surf, the more links we click, the more pages we view, the more opportunities Google and other companies gain to collect information about us and to feed us adverts. And most of the proprietors of the commercial internet have got a financial stake in collecting the crumbs of data that we leave behind. And the last thing these companies want is to encourage leisurely reading or slow, concentrated thought. It's in their economic interest to drive us to distraction. So I'll say this last bit again. It's in their economic interest to drive us to distraction. So basically there is financial interest, financial benefit to us being distracted, to us being kind of, our minds becoming, faster and faster, clicking through to products and to adverts. There's money to be made out of that. One last quote and I'll kind of lay off Facebook and Google a bit, but Bodhinaga talks about the attention economy, and this is what he writes. He says, companies such as Google and Facebook, they're now part of a generalised effort to mine individuals for information that they can use to predict or even modify their behaviour, and thereby better target the selling of consumer products. And I find myself buying things that I didn't mean to buy. And you just wonder how much of my behaviour is being modified by Google and Facebook. It's just an interesting question to reflect on, to pose. And even Buddhist book publishers, I regularly get an email from a Buddhist book publisher, and I click it and I think, I wonder what books there are, and I often buy a book that I'm never going to read and wasn't planning to buy. And so, even Buddhist book publishers aren't immune from modifying our behaviour and kind of targeting us in this kind of way. So, it's basically, we need to become aware of the effect of the input, the effect that it's having on our behaviour, but also on our awareness and our state of mind. And in a sense, what's happened is we are, through interaction with the internet, the way the internet works, and it's as though our mind is trained to run more efficiently and to be more productive. We can become a more efficient consumer. We can buy things more quickly. That's this one aspect of it, which is drawn out very well in Bodhinaga's book. But there are other downsides to an addiction to social media or the internet, which is essentially what I'm talking about, kind of in my own behaviour, and I'm sure lots of other people's behaviour, is an addictive pattern, a kind of habitual addictive pattern to social media and email, the internet. And like anything addictive, we can use social media to kind of numb our minds for comfort in a way, to avoid changing. We've got a sense of discomfort, and we just, like anything addictive, we reach for it, we grab it in a habitual kind of reactive way, just to kind of numb our minds and reach for something comfortable. And there's a reason that's again drawn out in Bodhinaga's book, which is a new word that I've discovered, a new abbreviation, which is FOMO. I've not heard of that before, but it's a fear of missing out. And apparently this is what drives social media. There's a fear of missing out. So I heard a few people laugh, so obviously that connects with other people. It connected with me, but there's a sense in which somewhere on the internet something exciting is happening, something interesting is happening in our friends' lives, and we're missing out on it. We don't know about it. So there's a very strong fear that we're missing out. We're just going to be forgotten about. That's another aspect of it, a fear that will just become irrelevant and forgotten about. So the desire for connection underlying it, I guess, but there's it's called FOMO in the industry, whatever industry it is, the attention industry, distraction industry. And that's what really drives, I think that's what makes Facebook and social media so successful, is that there's a human need for connection, and we fear missing out on something important. And there's a psychologist in Chicago University ran a study on the power of this kind of desire to not miss out. And he found, in the time of the Buddha had said that there's nothing more powerful than the desire for sex. So we talk about sexual craving traditionally as being the strongest form of desire, the most difficult form of desire to resist. But in this study in Chicago, it was found that the desire for the fear of missing out was a stronger desire, more difficult desire to abstain from, to resist than sex or food. So that's how addictive it is, really. This desire this fear of missing out. So when we become reactive and habitual and addictive, we lose our ability to be creative in a situation, for our mind to be creative. And there's something quite worrying, or for me, or striking for me again in Bodhinaga's book. I'm borrowing a lot in this section of the talk. You'll notice I'm borrowing a lot from Bodhinaga's book. But he talked about how children, when they learn to read and write with a pen, they engage a particular part of their mind, and when they learn to read or write by typing and using computers, that part of their mind doesn't get engaged in the same way, and it inhibits the ability to be creative, to think creatively. There's also, so I think that's very concerning for me, that children becoming more and more learning through computers might become less and less creative, that the ability to become creative is diminished. And that's really a really vital part of the spiritual life, as we'll see hopefully later, that the ability to think creatively, to be creative. And also we are trained to want immediate results, instant results, kind of immediate gratification. At the click of a button we can get exactly what we want. We can see what we want to see, we can learn what we want to learn, we can buy what we want to buy. So we become frustrated if we don't get things immediately, and we can lose patience, the ability to just to be patient with not getting what we want straight away. And yeah, I've observed this in my own son actually. I've got a 12-month-old son, and he's got different, what I find are different categories of toys. There's noisy toys and there's quiet toys, basically. That's how I categorise them. And I've got a strong preference for the quiet toys. So that bias that might influence my findings in this experiment. What I've observed is that if my son plays with noisy toys, then what happens, he'll press a button and it makes a noise and he's very happy. And then he'll want to press the button again and make the same noise and he's happy. And then he starts to want to press it before the song's finished. He wants to press it again. It gets faster and faster. Then he wants a different toy. And he gets all these toys that make a noise out, and he presses all the buttons. And he presses them all at the same time. And he gets more and more kind of worked up and more kind of frenetic, more and more anxious. And it's really noticeable the state that he gets in actually. It's quite a frenetic, anxious state from just having these toys where you press something and you get an immediate kind of response, a noise or a light or something like that. And then, it's just really noticeable seeing him with what I call quiet toys. So he's got this box of wooden dominoes with pictures of Paddington Bear on them. Or even a box full of clothes pegs. That's his favourite toy, is a box full of clothes pegs for doing the washing. And he'll sit with him for 20 minutes, half an hour, and just look at a clothes peg and put it back again. Look at a different clothes peg, put it back in, empty them all out, put them back in again. And literally for 20 minutes, half an hour, he's happy just with clothes pegs. And his state of mind is just really pleasant, actually. It's just really kind of pleasant to engage with, very calm, very happy. A really marked difference from all his noisy toys, pressing all the buttons. He just gets really frenetic and worked up. So, there's basically the effect it has on our mind, just wanting something straight away, and the anxiety, the kind of frenetic effect it has on us. For me, again, is a concern, is worrying. Just a couple of other side effects of the distraction industry. And one is that we become, if our mind is distracted and pulled in different directions, lots of different directions, we get spread thin. And there's this term Radhika uses from somebody else called, we become pancake people. It's like we become kind of very, very thin, just on the surface, pancake people, with no depth really. It's like if our mind is pulled always in different directions, we don't have time to really just reflect or go deeper with any one thing. That kind of depth comes from just staying with one thing and contemplating it or reflecting it. But if our mind's constantly pulled this way and that way, we just, we're pancake people. And the Buddha used a similar metaphor. He talked about a kind of the mind, the consciousness as being like a mountain stream. And if it's dispersed in lots of different directions, by the time it gets to the bottom, it's just a trickle. There's no kind of energy, no power, no strength left in the mind, in the consciousness. But if it's kind of concentrated, it's all flowing in the same way there's potency, there's strength and there's power. So we need to be aware of our mind becoming dispersed, our awareness, our attention becoming dispersed. And the final thing is just that increasingly we're kind of plugged in to the internet and social media all the time. All the time I've got my phone in my pocket all the time. Increasingly people are taking phones and tablets to bed and to the bedroom, so it's kind of encroaching on sleep. We're sleeping less. Apparently as a nation we sleep less than we used to, and there's a statistic that a third of the workforce in the UK are sleep deprived. So the sense in which we are sleeping less than we used to, and smartphones and the internet are kind of encroaching on sleep, as well as walking. I've already mentioned the kind of digital dead, shuffling along. So we've got kind of smartphones when we're walking, we've got them in the bedroom. And it's not uncommon sometimes, I'm afraid to say, that Lucy and I, my wife and I, will, before we go to sleep, we'll lie in bed, and rather than talking to each other, I'll be looking at football scores on like a digital dead zombie, and Lucy will be looking at Facebook or something better than that, but I'll be looking at rubbish. And rather than talking to each other, it's quite a strange thing to do, really, isn't it? Quite a sad thing to do. And, so I'd like not to do that. I'd like also to, I'm trying to do this, to engage with my son as much as possible and not be distracted by checking emails or or Facebook or football scores or whatever it is. So I've got fears for the next generation in a way, the kind of my son and his generation, because at least myself and other people here, I know what it was like before computers, before social media, before smartphones. I can remember what that was like, so I've got an alternative, I've got something to think towards. But people who are just born into that age, what will their consciousness be like? What will the impact be on people's minds and their consciousness? So I do have concerns for the future generation. Yeah. So if you have been distracted by that bit, you can pay attention again to this next bit, which is about how we can deal with this. How can we deal with this assault on our senses, all this input, the adverts, the internet, phones, TV, all this stuff which is vying for our attention, trying to distract our attention. How can we deal with this? How can we mitigate the effects of this? Well, Sangha Rakshita's advice to order members in 1993 is even more important than it was then, to reduce input, to reduce our input. We need to limit our use. If we want to cultivate awareness, if we want to cultivate mindfulness, if we want to cultivate a mind that is more awake, more vividly alive, then we need to reduce input. We need to have times when we limit our use of the internet, use of tablets, smartphones, e-books. Maybe you have time completely away from them. That would be quite radical, but have time completely away from phones, internet, tablets, and the digital world. So one way you can do this is to go on retreat. And alarmingly, there are people, I've seen more and more people who take tablets and phones and use them during retreats. But this is an opportunity to be completely away from the influence of input in a way, and notice what effect it has on your mind and your consciousness. Go on retreat and turn your devices off, turn off your phones, turn off your tablets, and what happens for me, I don't know what would happen for you, but what happens to me is like any addiction, there's an itch and an urge to want to, there's a fear of missing out, and there's a desire to want to check my emails, check my phone, and that can last for a day, it can last for 2 days on a retreat. But at some point that will pass. At some point that desire, that urge will pass. I'll just completely forget about phones, forget about football scores, forget about Facebook, and that is real relief actually when that happens. When you kind of reach that point when that kind of itch, that urge to check and fear of missing out passes, there's a real relief. I say there was one time on a solitary retreat where actually I got driven mad with FOMO, with fear of missing out, and the solitary place I was staying at had a radio with batteries in, and I realised that Liverpool would be playing on this particular day, and I thought, well, I don't want to miss out, I want to know what their score is, and maybe I can get a phone signal in a certain place. And it really drove me mad, well not literally mad, but it drove me to distraction in a way. It kind of, just really strong urge to want to know what was happening in the world of football, which does seem quite crazy, but it can be a really strong urge. But it does pass. If you can wait for a day or two, then usually that will pass. And what opens up is the possibility to go deeper, to grow, to change, and to experience completely different states of mind that you wouldn't usually experience, and blissful states of mind, to get to know yourself better. On my ordination retreat, I was away for 16 weeks, completely away from input, any input at all actually, away from the outside world, from radios, TVs, computers, everything really. Just lived a really, really simple life. And I just felt so connected actually. I felt so connected to myself, to the people I was living with for those 16 weeks. I felt really connected to the world around me, to the mountains and the wildlife and the earth. I just felt really connected. And really also connected to my sense of purpose, like I've never done before, just really connected to the sense that this is what my life is about Buddhist practice and following the Buddhist path. A real strong sense of purpose and real contentment actually. the most happy and content I've ever experienced in those 16 weeks. So it's really, I mean, I've had a really strong experience of being without those distractions and without those inputs. And yeah, it's very good actually for me, a very positive experience. So you may have had an experience like that, you might have been able to go on retreat. But if you're, for whatever reason, unable to go on retreats, what we also try and do sometimes in Sheffield and is what's called an urban retreat. So what we try and do is recreate the experience of being on retreat at home, basically, and in our life, in our day-to-day life. So we're going about the usual routines, but we're at work, we're meeting the same people at home, but we try and change, we try and make some modifications to try and recreate some of the benefits, some of the conditions of being on retreat. So yeah, here's some of the things that if you were trying to recreate some of those conditions, here's some of the things that you could try. So the first thing would be to try and limit the use of emails. You know, how often you're going to check emails. We don't have to. I don't have to. I suppose I should speak personally. I don't have to check my emails every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes. Maybe I could check them 3 times a day, maybe twice a day even. Maybe once a day would be quite radical. Maybe I could have a week without Facebook, or maybe a month without Facebook. I mean, that would be quite perhaps a radical thing to try. Simplify your routine. So one of the enemies of distraction is kind of busyness, and this kind of attempt to do multiple things all at the same time. And Sangha actually describes in a lecture the Japanese tea ceremony as being the kind of a symbol of aware activity, awareness, mindful activity, where in Japan it's ceremonially people will make a cup of tea. So this is something we do lots of times each day, I'm sure. We make a cup of tea. But in Japan they very, very mindfully get the kettle ready. They very, very mindfully make a coal fire set up. They very, very mindfully pour water and place the tea leaves into the tea. They very, very mindfully wait for it to boil, and very, very mindfully pour the tea out, and then very, very mindfully drink it in silence, I suppose. I think that's what happens. How often do we make a cup of tea like that, or eat or drink something like that, just kind of very, very mindfully, just fully present and possessed of what we're doing? I mean, how often do I taste the tea that I'm drinking even? I might be trying to drink a cup of tea, read Bodhinaga's book to prepare for this talk, buy something on the internet, check the cricket scores. How many things can we do at one time? And the opposite of that is to do one thing at a time and to do it beautifully. To do one thing beautifully. That's a phrase that a friend of mine, Achara, told me. To do one thing beautifully. That's something to try. If you want to try and recreate retreat conditions, just do one thing beautifully. Even more radical than doing one thing beautifully, do nothing at all. Be idle. Don't do anything. Have times in your day or in your routine where you just simply be idle, do nothing at all. Because if we're not distracting ourselves when we just sit with our experience, then something new can arise out of it. Probably boredom to start with. We'll be bored because our mind's used to being occupied and having input and being distracted. But if we can sit with boredom, then what happens is we can go through the boredom and we get into a more fuller, more satisfying, deeply satisfying experience of ourselves. We can just become more deeply connected with ourself and our experience of ourselves. And then something new can come out of that. Whole new experience that we wouldn't have had will come out the other side of that boredom. So we do need spaces. We need spaces just to sit and do nothing, just to be idle, just to do nothing at all, if we can manage that. Something else we could try is to go for walks in nature, because out in the Peak District there's no advertising. If we're lucky, there's no phone signal. We're just completely away from input, and we're surrounded by beauty, we're surrounded by nature, we're surrounded by beauty, and we can just really inhabit our senses and inhabit our experience and enjoy it. So if the Peak District is free, it's there, use it. Go for walks and enjoy. And periods without email, without the internet, without Facebook, without a phone signal. Yes. And the last thing to suggest is just to spend time looking at things, which might sound odd, but if we're kind of distracted and our senses are being bombarded by input, we kind of very often might be in a state of mind where we don't really pay full attention, we're unable to pay full attention to the world around us, to things around us. And Sangha actually again poses a question, well, how often do we just kind of stop and look at things, just really look at something like a tree? And we might walk by so many trees each day, looking at our screens, like I do. How many times would you just look at the world around us and really take it in? And even less romantic things, he says, than trees, like the wall or the floor, or how often do we actually just look at what's around us? So just really kind of paying attention and looking, being curious. I remember doing this once actually, just well, okay, I'll look at a wall, why not? I'll look at a wall, let's see what happens. And I remember kind of just being surprised at how much detail, layers of detail started to become filled in, like as my mind had looked at the wall, more and more different aspects of the wall started to come out, just different layers, different textures, different things that I didn't notice in a way. And I suppose what this is drawing attention to is that when our minds are so busy and preoccupied, it's more efficient. I suppose our minds are used to thinking fast and efficiently. We just kind of fill in the gaps of what's there. We think, oh, that's a wall, that's a tree, that's a video camera, that's Tansel, that's an overhang. So we kind of don't really look at people, we don't really take in what's around us, because we kind of fill in, our mind fills in the blanks. But yeah, we need to just really become more aware, really stop and look at the world around us, things around us, people around us. Yeah, so the urban retreats, I don't know when our next one is, but we should do one very soon. We ought to do one very soon. I found urban retreats to be really, really important for my practice, actually, my Buddhist practice, just to experience, well, in my day-to-day situation, I can make changes, quite small changes, but may have a big impact on my experience of the world and of myself, just by reducing the number of times I check my emails, in a way, just having a sense of control, feeling like I'm making the choices, I'm in control of how often I look at the internet, how often I look at my emails. So yeah, I found I had a sense of control, but also a sense of purpose, actually. When doing the urban retreats for the first time, off retreat, just at home, I had a real sense that all the time I was a Buddhist. I would kind of all the time remembered that I was a Buddhist, and all the time had this continuing sense of purpose of what my life was about. But one of the side effects for me of just constantly being distracted by things is that I would just get drawn into different worlds and different situations and just kind of constantly forget who I was and what I was about, and just limiting that. What I noticed, what I experienced was a continuity of purpose throughout the day. Throughout the day, I just really knowing who I was and what I was about, what my values were. Yeah. So, yeah, the world is set up around us to distract us. Our world is set up to distract us. You could say to kind of turn us into reactive minds, to minds that are asleep, that are robotic, that are habitual. So surely mindfulness will help us to change this. Surely mindfulness will help us to reverse this, to change this. But not necessarily, actually. Only if it's practiced, for me, only if it's practiced in the fullest sense, in the kind of truest sense, for me, will mindfulness completely reverse this. So there has been recently criticism of Western Buddhism and criticism of secular mindfulness. Because what mindfulness can do is help people just to tolerate situations that are difficult. So, and in a way, to continue to be exploited without actually without addressing the situation, without changing it. So, for example, businesses are using mindfulness in their business to help their staff to tolerate the stress that they're under and the difficult conditions, to work more productively, to waste less time, to be more efficient. And that's not what mindfulness is for. It's not the Buddhist use of mindfulness. And Vadaka makes the point, well, there are lots of Buddhist teachers teaching mindfulness, so hopefully they're bringing different aspects into the teaching of mindfulness. They're bringing an emphasis on kindness and other aspects of of Buddhist practice. But there's a danger in which mindfulness is used, and potentially people could use Buddhism just to kind of cover over the cracks in a way, just to kind of not change anything, not to grow, not to develop, not to change, but just to kind of tolerate their situation. And that's not what Buddhism is for, and it's not what mindfulness is for. So why does this happen? Well, basically, Bodhinaga makes a point that there isn't a lot of evidence to show that mindfulness in businesses is making businesses more ethical or more compassionate. It's unfortunately suggests it's the opposite. That what is resulting from the mindfulness being taught in businesses is he describes it as a disconnect from reality, almost like a disconnection from the ethical reality of situations. So he describes a kind of workshop where top executives, I think it's at Google, are being taught mindfulness. Millionaires, really, really rich people are being taught mindfulness, and the mindfulness meditation is disrupted by protest from people in San Francisco protesting about negative ethical consequences that are happening because of their work. And the person leading the exercise said, well, just be mindful, be aware of the distraction, and return to your body, return to your breathing. And in a sense, it was, the person was describing how the people were using mindfulness just to kind of be disconnected from the ethical reality of the situation, in a way to become comfortable in their own experience, to kind of, and in a way, disconnected from the ethical reality of the situation. And so this is not what mindfulness is for in the Buddhist context. It's not what Buddhism is for, what mindfulness is for. So awareness should be revolutionary. Mindfulness and awareness should be revolutionary. So if mindfulness is watered down, or when mindfulness is watered down, there's often an overemphasis, an over-reliance on an aspect of mindfulness called sati, which is about being in the present moment. It's about being with your body, being with your breathing. That's the one aspect of mindfulness called sati. And there's often a kind of an over-reliance, an over-emphasis on sati, as I understand it. But there's two other words that the Buddha used, which also get translated as mindfulness in the Pali Canon, and they mean quite different things to sati. So there's the words appamada and sampajana, and appamada describes more of a kind of an ethical vigilance, an ethical awareness, and it's what I would describe as being in the gap, what we talk about being in the gap and making ethical choices. There's a particular aspect of mindfulness which is about being ethically vigilant and making ethical choices. And then sampajana is also translated as mindfulness, and it involves being aware of a higher purpose, being aware of your higher purpose in your life. So if those aspects of mindfulness are left out, what you're left with is a kind of watered down being in the present moment, being with the air as it pushes against our face, which is very nice, but it's not going to on its own have the same effect. It's not fully what mindfulness is about and what Buddhism is about. So for awareness to be revolutionary, it needs to involve wisdom. It needs to involve awareness of reality. It needs to involve wisdom. So Bodhinaga makes a point that rather than just helping us to kind of tolerate suffering, awareness really should go to the root of suffering, the causes of suffering. So the Buddha's teaching goes to the causes of suffering, to dukkha, and the causes of dukkha. In a sense, how our attitude and approach to life causes suffering, and how we can change that. And it also includes an awareness of our potential. So an awareness of reality includes an awareness of change, what could be possible, our potential as human beings. So we need awareness to be revolutionary needs to include wisdom, it needs to have an awareness of reality. But it also needs to extend to an awareness of other people. So in the same way that we become more and more aware of how we are suffering and our own dukkha, we become aware of other people's dukkha, we become aware of other people's suffering, and that leads to compassion and empathy and metta, kindness. So awareness needs to extend to include other people if it's going to be revolutionary. It needs to include compassion. most importantly for me at the moment is awareness of ethical choices, what I understand as appamada, this aspect of mindfulness. Just to be aware of the choices that we make and the consequences that they have, and to be in the gap so we can choose, we can become in control of our decisions and our choices. So it's this aspect of awareness that includes an ethical awareness, an awareness of the consequences of us and on other people, of our actions, our choices. So as we become more aware of the choices we make, we see there's an impact on the wider world. So going back to our theme of transforming self and world, as we become more and more aware of our own actions, we become aware of our impact, our ethical impact that we have on the world. But we also become aware of the consequences for us of our own choices. If we choose to allow ourselves to be distracted, well, that's going to shape how we experience the world. It's going to shape our mind. It's going to shape our consciousness and how we experience the world. So we need to take control of that, actually. And as I was walking, not looking at my smartphone. I was thinking about the talk. I was walking this afternoon to the Botanical Gardens, trying to take a bit of this advice and be in nature. It was interesting, actually. I was in Starbucks to start with, having a coffee, and most of the people in Starbucks, including me, were looking at their smartphones whilst drinking their coffee. And I went to the Botanical Gardens and I did a little count. There's about 50 people, and there was 3 people who were using their phones. That was go to the Botanical Gardens. That's the tip. So I went to the Botanical Gardens, and what I was thinking is that I don't want to be a passenger. I don't want to be a passenger in my own life. This is an experience that I had in the past when I first came to Buddhism and to the Buddhist Centre. I don't want my life to be decided for me by other people or by circumstances. I want to take charge of my decisions and my actions. And I don't even want to be a tourist in my own life. I don't want to just become a calm observer who just observes what's happening, which could be a kind of watered down version of mindfulness. I don't want to be a tourist, I don't want to be a passenger, but I want to be the driver. I want to be the person who's driving my life, my decisions, my intentions, and the consequences of my actions. So, maybe rather than being an efficient consumer, we could, who sees the world about what we can get and how we can get immediate results and wanted things straight away, we could try and we could use awareness to become more creative, and we could see ourselves as an artist, maybe an artist of the mind, an artist of consciousness who is creating something beautiful, something beautiful around them. You could see yourself as an architect of the mind, who is building a sound mind built on foundations of ethics and ethical values. You could see yourself as an alchemist of the mind. I was feeling poetical this afternoon. An alchemist of the mind, transforming desires into compassion and love and kindness. But I don't want to be, I don't know about you, but I don't want to be shepherded in my life. I don't want kind of off-the-peg life. I don't want an off-the-peg lifestyle. I don't want predefined options and add-ons on my lifestyle. I want an undefined, uncertain life. I want my future to be unwritten. I don't want to know what's going to happen to me in the future. I want it to be an adventure. I want it to be uncertain and unwritten. So revolutionary awareness. If awareness is revolutionary, it will lead us away from sleepy, robotic, distracted, mechanical states of mind and wake us up. Revolutionary awareness will wake us up into new, uncharted territory.